Yo, what is up, guys? It is your boy Zeta here, back at it again to drop the movie version for What If Deku Was Spider-Man. In case you're a new viewer, welcome to the channel. I'll love to have you guys here as, a brand new subscriber if you just so happen to like the series and like my storytelling. That being said, I hope you guys enjoy the story, seeing as, it was one of those stories that I worked really hard on. And for those of you who are, old viewers who are just rewatching it as a movie version or something like that, I appreciate you guys for doing that. However, there is, before the video starts, there's going to be a couple of links down in the description that I would appreciate very much if you checked out before you started. Number one, my Discord server, the Akatsuki group channel, as well as, what else do I even have down there? I don't know, but just check the description. That being said though, I don't want to waste you guys' time, seeing as, this video is going to be long already. So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so we start our story off with the teacher asking Deku if he knows what type of spider this is. The teacher would be referring to a spider that's actually within a glass box inside of a school field trip. This is when Deku would look at her as he would say, "Oh, of course," and he would then answer the question, to which she would say, "That's the perfect answer." As Bakugo would then yell out from the back, he would say, "Of course that nerd Parker can answer it. He's a total loser." As their entire class would proceed to look at Deku and just start laughing, the teacher would look at Deku and she would give him like a little bit of a sad smile, and she would say, "Guys, that's enough. Leave Izuku alone," as Bakugo would start laughing and everybody would go off. At this point, Deku would kind of be used to everything. This is kind of the daily routine in his life, and Deku honestly just doesn't feel the need to say anything about it. I mean, what's the point anyways? At this point, Deku would be in 6th grade and they would actually be on their last field trip. It would be the second to last week of school for him, and at this point Deku would be 11 years old. Of course, most average 6th graders are about 11 to 12 years old. So yeah, Deku would be 11, and this is when Deku would kind of just be like, well, another day I guess, as Deku would continue to follow his class. On this particular day, they're on a field trip to Osborne Tech. And now some of you guys may be like, "Yo, dude, Osborne isn't he in America and in New York?" To which I'm going to be answering that by saying plot. All right. Just simply plot. Okay, let's just say that this version of events, Osborne, his parents ended up tragically passing away, and so Osborne was moved to Japan where he has another family, right? And he started building his multi-billionaire company, which is Osborne Tech. On this particular day, the school would have actually decided that it would be a nice little change of pace, that instead of going to some amusement park or, something cool like that, they should just go and learn something, have a cool learning experience with one of the richest men in the world, Osborne himself. They would all be on the field trip, and this is when Deku would be walking, kind of just following in the back, tailing behind everybody, and Bakugo would be the center of attention, as they would all be led by just a little bit of a worker at Osborne Tech. She would be guiding them through the area, and this is when they would get to about the 4th level. This is when Deku would notice that he would actually notice Osborne himself. As Deku would see Osborne walking away, Deku would want to ask him a question, so he would start to tail behind him and completely lose track of his class. This is when Deku would proceed to basically start kind of tailing Osborne, and he would start to follow him, as I already stated. As Osborne would basically just be walking through the corridors, he would kind of not really notice Deku, seeing as they're walking on a little bit of a carpet type floor, and he is walking pretty fast. Deku would be walking after him trying to say something, but Deku would end up losing him after he turns the corner. At this point, Deku would look around and he would see 2 doors, to which Deku would be like, where did he go? As Deku would then say, "I really wanted to ask him something." As Deku would say, "Well, I guess it can't be helped." Deku would be like, "No, I need to ask. I need to know." Also, guys, apologies for that background noise, but Deku would say, "I need to know," as he would then basically open the wrong door. Osborne would have been to the left, but Deku would have opened the right door. And this is when Deku would immediately walk into a room which has a sort of hologram projectile of a spider web. At this point, Deku would stumble back after seeing that. He would see a giant projectile of a spider, and Deku would say, "What?" As he would stumble back and he would knock down a little container of glass. Deku would look around, he would see, "Oh no, this is not okay." But before Deku can even pay more attention to that, this This is when Deku would notice the spider would begin to change, and he would see many spiders crawling around. It would be a scene very reminiscent to the Amazing Spider-Man, the original, the movie which, you know, Andrew Garfield was in. And Deku would just kind of be like, this is incredible. This version of Deku would be way more intelligent than his original counterpart, due to the fact that, you know, this man is Izuku Parker, not Midoriya, and his father's name is Parker. Right? Inko will of course stay the same, and Deku will have inherited his father's hair color. That's why his hair is like that, and his hairstyle as well, which is why Deku looks like that. Now, this is when Deku would kind of realize that he probably shouldn't be in here, and Deku at this point would start to walk out. However, he wouldn't have noticed that the spider, it would have definitely crawled onto his leg in a Spider-Man fashion. Now, inside of the room, there was a sort of presentation which I forgot to mention. They were designing a genetically enhanced spider, which was actually going to be far stronger than Peter's version in the original comics, and even more powerful than Miles' spider. Due to the fact that in this world, quirks are inherently common. Everybody and their mother has a quirk, so what would it do good if somebody just had some normal spider powers? That's not really a big thing anymore. In this world, that's not considered that impressive. So Osborne Tech took it a step farther, and they were working on a secret project which was actually meant to go towards military forces of Japan to increase their soldiers' strength. Seeing as most soldiers nowadays have incredible quirks, but what if on top of that, they had genetically enhanced soldiers? And that's what Osborne Tech was working on. On top of that, they were also working on a toxic gas, which is the ingredients for the Green Goblin, seeing as he's definitely going to be a big part to the story. There's not going to be any other characters involved in the series other than he and two more characters. Okay, two more characters will be introduced later on. Now, this is when Deku would walk out of the place, and Deku would honestly just walk over to his class as he would find them, and he would just kind of just tail behind his group, as nobody would have really noticed that Deku was gone. Nobody was looking at Deku after all. Not even the teacher would have. She would have been more focused on controlling Bakugo and his weird, naive nature. This is when Deku would go home, and of course, by the time that he was on his way home, he would have felt a little bit of a poke on the back of his neck. Deku would of course write this off as a mosquito bite, and Deku would go home. As Deku would wake up the very next day, and in just a very common Spider-Man fashion, when he would go over to his mirror to kind of just wake up and splash some water in his face to clean himself off for the day, for the very next, for the weekend, for the weekend, do I want to make it like this? Yeah, let's just say that the powers take a little longer to kick in, right? Deku spent the entire weekend kind of not really doing anything, and of course Deku would wake up on Monday, just due to the fact that I want to make the story go by a little different. Or we could just say that their field trip was, we're just gonna say that their field trip was on Sunday, the day that, you know, school wasn't around. So the very next day, Deku would wake up, and of course he would go over to brush his teeth and get ready for school. As Deku does this, he wouldn't have a shirt on, and Deku would notice that his body looks so toned. He has abs, and his arms, they're so much bigger than usual. Deku would start to check himself out a little bit and be like, whoa, as Deku would kind of just start admiring what he looks like. As this is when Inko would walk into the room, and she'd be like, hey, Izuku, I need you outside. Breakfast is ready? She would see Izuku looks totally ripped, and she would say, whoa, you've been working out? Deku would see that he has, and Inko would smile as she would say, all right, well, come get your breakfast in 5, all right? It's getting cold, as Deku would say, right, and he would end up just kind of brushing his teeth pretty quickly, throwing his shirt on and grabbing his backpack, as he would say, thanks for the grub, Mom, as he would end up running outside of the door, and she would say, that kid, as, you know, Hisashi Parker's just sitting there on the table with this newspaper, just being like, that kid, as he'll basically just have Deku going onto the bus and having a normal school day up until they get to lunch. Now, this is when Deku would kind of just be sitting in there, and everything would be completely normal until Deku would kind of be going over to grab his silverware. As Deku would do that, he would make a sort of weird, like, Spider-Man motion with his hand. As he was going to go do that, he would end up accidentally shooting a spider web in front of him. And what do you know it? That was Bakugo's table. And guess who he hit? Yeah, It was Bakugo. He hit Bakugo with Spiderweb, even stickier than Spider-Man's himself. As Deku would immediately realize what he had just done, Deku would try to shake the Spiderweb off of him, and Bakugo would turn around as he would say, "Who did that?" Deku would immediately put his hand behind himself and act as if he doesn't know what's going on, with Bakugo walking up to Deku, seeing that the spiderweb was connected to Deku's hand. He would pick him up by his shirt and say, "You want to start something, nerd? Because I can finish it." As Deku would say, I'm sorry, Kachan. It was an accident. I swear." As Bakugo would say, "No, there's no accidents." This is when a teacher would walk up to Bakugo and say, "Hey, settle down." As Deku would be sitting there kind of with fear in his eyes, saying, "Yeah, Bakugo, I swear I didn't do it." Bakugo would let Deku go and say, "All right, nerd, but the next time I catch you, you won't get so lucky." Deku would immediately run out of there, and after lunch was over, Bakugo would have one goal on his mind: finding that quirkless dickhead Parker. As Deku would basically be running around through the corners, he would basically end up bumping into Bakugo on his way to class, seeing as Bakugo knew exactly where Deku was going. He would end up walking over to him and say, "Hey, you think it's funny to do that to me, kid?" As Deku would turn around and say, "No, Bakugo, I swear it wasn't me." As this is when Bakugo would throw an explosion at Deku's face, as Deku would see it coming at him in slow motion with the spider senses, which would kick in. Deku would dodge out of the way in a sort of Spider-Man fashion in the movies if you guys watched it. After that, Bakugo would see his hand was a little hurt after that, and he'd say, "You're gonna pay for that, Deku." As he would proceed to throw another hit at Deku, and Deku would dodge it too. This is when Bakugo would look at Deku in a strange way, and he'd say, "What's going on? Why do you keep dodging?" Deku would say, and this is when Bakugo would go in to tackle Deku, but before he can, Deku would do a front flip over him as Bakugo would say, "Huh?" And this is when Bakugo would throw an explosion at Deku, as Deku would say, "No, I can defend myself." He would throw a punch at Bakugo, which would actually send him crashing into the locker room and leaving a print of himself indenting himself into the walls of the lockers. After this, Bakugo would get up, and the teacher would walk up to Deku as he would say, "Izuku, how dare you hurt another student?" Deku would then be called into the main office, and well, this is when Deku would get scolded by the principal and the teacher who actually saw everything go down. He would say that Bakugo started it too, but seeing as Bakugo lost, he would end up getting about 3 days of suspension, with Deku getting, Bakugo would get 1 day of suspension, and Deku would get 3. Seeing as he gets 3, he would be gone Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. After this, Deku would have actually been smiling this whole time. Deku would be thinking, this is my quirk. It has to be. It just has to be. I woke up strong. I shot webs. I'm stronger. Everything was in slow motion. And this is when Inko would come over to pick up Deku, as she would say, "Izuku, how could you have gotten in a fight?" She would begin to start scolding Deku, and she would notice that Deku was smiling the whole time. She would ask him why he's so happy, and Deku would look at her. She would say, "Mom, I got my quirk." Inko would look at Deku as she would say, "No way." As Deku would say, "I swear, Mom, you remember the muscles you saw me with in the morning? That wasn't me. I haven't even been working out. That must have been my quirk." Inko would immediately say, "Let's go to the quirk doctor." As Deku would immediately light up, and they would of course go to the quirk doctor. To which this is when the doctor would say that, he doesn't know what's going on, but this has to be a quirk. He has to be some sort of late bloomer. The strength, it's definitely there. Deku was able to pick up like 50 times his own body weight, and it was just completely insane. This is when the doctor would begin to ask Deku if there's been any weird occurrences lately, and Deku would think of the spider. He would then say no, and this is when Deku would just go home with his mom, Inko, extremely happy. This is when we're now going to have Deku arriving home, as Inko would immediately rush to Hisashi, and she would say, "Dear, he finally unlocked his quirk." Hisashi would look at Deku as he would say, "Is that true?" And Deku would say, "Yeah, I have spider powers from what the doctor told me." This is when Hisashi would say, "I knew it. I knew someday you were going to be unlocking your quirk. How about we go over there and help you get trained up?" As this is when we're going to be having a little bit of a training montage when Deku and Hisashi both training in a little bit of an abandoned warehouse, kind of similar to the one that Andrew Garfield worked out in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. This is when Deku would find out a couple of his abilities. And why do I say a couple? Well, it's because all of his abilities haven't been unveiled just yet. Deku would discover that so far, He has incredible speed. Deku can create electricity from his fingers. He can turn invisible. He can adapt in fights. And it seems that he has a weird sort of second consciousness within him. See, in this version, the symbiote known as Venom was actually taken apart and taken into consideration when they were creating the spider. They took some of the symbiote's DNA, and so Deku has some of his innate abilities. Deku has the ability to see about 2 seconds into the future. He has some sort of weird future sight. He has super senses. He has incredible intelligence. It was amplified by the spider. He's faster than Spider-Man. If I had to give you guys a sort of comparison, he'd be about 5 times faster than him and comparable to All Might's strength. Deku has also different types of webbings. He has invisible webbing, black webbing, acid webbing, lightning webbing, fire webbing, and metal webbing. It's strange. Deku doesn't not only have normal webbing, but he literally has different variations of it, which he can actually shoot out of his normal body. It shoots out like fluids, meaning that it doesn't come from some sort of device. Deku has it all naturally. And as I already said, Deku has some pretty incredible webbing. Now, if you're wondering, yo, dude, why does he have all this? Why are you making Deku Spider-Man so OP? It's a commission. Like, bro, my man Keith asked me for these powers, and I was game. These powers are incredible. Anyways. The metal webbing, it's very strong. The fire webbing, it basically is just normal webbing that can light on fire. So due to, Miles Morales being able to have lightning webbing, I see no problem with fire, acid, or black webbing, which pretty much kind of comes from Venom's ability, which is kind of what Deku has a little bit of an ability to do. His suit, he's gonna unlock his suit a little later, but his suit is gonna come from the symbiote. You guys will see on the second part. Not yet. You guys aren't ready for all that heat just yet. Anyways, that being said, Deku would end up finding out a couple of his powers so far, and this is when the couple of days would go by, as Deku would have ended up working on trying to control them, but so far he's only able to use them whenever in very weird situations. This is when Deku would decide to jump off of a building, and he would finally discover how to use his Spider-Man powers. He'd start swinging from building to building with his mother and father, of course, not knowing, because if Deku didn't die from this, they would kill him themselves. Anyways, this is when Deku would return to school the very next day, the last day, and this is when Bakugo would approach Deku in the middle of classes. He would say, "You got some nerve to come back here, even after what you did, Deku." As Deku would say he's sorry, and he didn't really mean to do that, but Bakugo did come after him. As Bakugo would slam his hand on Deku's desk and say, "Yeah, I came after you shot me with some weird webs. Now, you need to stay out of my way, Deku." As Deku would say, "Sure thing, Bakugo," he would sit in the back of the class and Bakugo would walk off. As this is when the whole entire day would basically end, and Bakugo at the end of school, when Deku's walking home, would end up approaching Deku with both of his little goons behind him. Bakugo at this point would try to jump Izuku, and this is when both of Bakugo's little goons would rush at Deku trying to attack him, but Deku would just be like, nah, and he would literally shoot webs at both of them, as he would literally cause them both to rush into each other and slam each other's heads into each other. They would both get knocked out, and at this moment, Deku would have a little bit of a cocky grin on his face as he would say, "What's the problem, Bakugo? Can't keep up?" As Bakugo would say, "Those two were just weaklings. You'll see, I've trained." As he would blitz towards Deku, well, not really blitz, since it's my hero, nobody can really blitz, but he would rush towards Deku as he would proceed to almost catch Deku off guard. Psych, no he would not. Deku would literally see what Bakugo was about to do with his foresight, and he would move out of the way. As well as using his spider senses, he would grab Bakugo's leg and with his strength smash him into the ground in a sort of Hulk fashion to Loki in the movie, in case you guys have seen the Avengers. This is when Deku, after doing that, would literally stand over the 3 goons that he just defeated and just run away, as he did not want to get in trouble after that. It's the final day of school and he is not having no summer detention, leading to Bakugo getting extremely angry seeing Deku run away. He would say, "How did that kid get a damn Quirk?" As he would then pass out due to his body just kind of failing him. He did get literally ragdolled by Deku. This is when we were finally going to have Deku going home. And this is when Bakugo, after a couple of years of kind of just getting, folded like a lawn chair by Deku, would finally leave Deku alone. Years would pass by, and we're now going to have a little bit of a time skip to when Deku is 15 years old. His final day of middle school. Now, during that time, you guys are probably wondering, what happened with Bakugo and Deku? Now, of course, Bakugo is the type of person to train and think that he's stronger now. So, Bakugo would, of course, train, and he would occasionally challenge Izuku every time he would feel strong enough. But, of course, Deku would, of course, just completely, as I said, fold the man like a lawn chair. He's way too OP, even without any of his experience. And now, Deku has a perfect control over all of his abilities. At this point, Deku is just too broken. Deku has mastered his ability of using metal webbing, which he uses to create sort of boxes around people, sort of prisons, I guess you could say. His fire webbing, he uses it on, kind of just slight moments. He doesn't really need to use the fire webbing, seeing as he can kind of just do that to light a blaze or something like that. And he would also use his lightning webbing. That one's the one he uses the most. He can control it to over 100 million volts, and he would also have the abilities of acid webbing. He can shoot short spurts of acid, sort of like Mina, and he even has black webbing, which is sort of like Venom's, which is kind of self-explanatory. He would also have invisible webbing, which is invisible to the naked eye. He's 15 times stronger than the original Spider-Man, 15 times faster, smarter than, like the original Spider-Man by 2 to 3 times. Perfect spider senses, meaning that this version doesn't have a sort of dysfunction. I don't know if you guys seen Far From Home, the second one, where they told him he had erectile dysfunction, but he doesn't have that. And Deku has the ability to see 20 to 30 seconds into the future with a Spider-Man's healing factor, and of course he has the personality of Peter, just because, we want to make him cocky. We want to make him confident, not cocky. Deku definitely knows the difference between the two of them off of seeing Bakugo. He knows what it's like to, be the kid on the other side. He would never wish that on somebody else. So he never uses his power or flashes it off in the way that Bakugo does. Matter of fact, he never even tries to use his abilities at all. He just trains with them just in case he ever does need them. And trust me, he will, because if you think that this version of Deku was OP, trust me, he's gonna need it due to a villain that I'm going to include. So, yeah, in case you're thinking, yo, Zether, this Deku is too OP. I don't care. If you don't like it, leave, bro. Leave. So, yeah, to those of you who do like it, apologies you had to hear that. Anyways, to continue. Now, Deku, of course, has invisibility, as I already said, and all the other abilities that I basically previously mentioned. Of course, I know I kind of, wasted a little bit of time, but as I said, now we're going to be flashing over to the last day of middle school with Deku in the back talking to his girlfriend. And yes, Deku has a girlfriend. Her name is Mary Jane. Bet a lot of you guys didn't see that coming. She is the other character which I am including into the series, and she has a shape-shifting quirk, which is super smart, kind of like the Far From Home version of Mary Jane. Now, that being said, this version of Deku, you may be wondering, how did he even get a girlfriend, Zether? Well, this version of Deku is a lot more liked. He even has more confidence to back it up, and he knows the difference between being cocky and confident, just due to Bakugo, as I had already stated. Bakugo showed him an example of what not to be, and Deku always tries to be the best version of himself. Now, you guys are probably wondering, dude, when did Mary Jane get introduced to the story? It was about 2 years ago. Now, she would have ended up being a sort of transfer student, and she would have ended up moving to Japan after a couple of years. Deku would have, of course, ended up teaching her a couple of things, and they ended up hitting it off very quickly, with Inko and Mary having a pretty cool relationship, to say the least. This is when Deku would, of course, kind of be talking with her in the back, as the teacher would walk inside and do his usual, I know you all want to become heroes. I'm just going to skip all over that. And Bakugo, yeah, he still is extremely cocky. Even though he shouldn't be like that, he still thinks he's the best for some reason. He hasn't fought Deku for 2 years, so he hasn't had a little bit of a reality check yet. So Deku would be in the back kind of talking to Mary, and they're both not really paying attention. People would be saying that Deku's definitely going to make it into UA after the teacher would announce that Deku wants to go there. He would even say that Mary wants to go there. And this is when Bakugo would stand up, as he would say, hey, you better not come into UA, either of you. I'm gonna be the only one who gets in from this cruddy school, and you two will be stuck in my dust. As Deku would say, yeah, Bakugo, whatever. With the class ending and Bakugo going off with his goons, just doing whatever it is they did in the original. This is when Deku and Mary would say that, they kind of want to go to Deku's house and have some dinner over there. As Deku would say, sure thing, as they would take a tunnel over there. A little bit of a different path, but they wouldn't be worried. And this This is when the Sludge villain would jump out at Deku, as, of course, Deku could see it coming. Deku, as soon as the Sludge villain would come in, he would shoot a web towards Mary and have her be kind of propelled into the sky. As she would be held up by a webbing, the Sludge villain would say, "Give me your body, kid. I didn't know that freak was in town." As Deku would say, "What? You want my body? No way, you freak." As the Sludge villain would say, "Enough of this. I don't have the time to mess with you. Now give me your body." As he would rush towards Deku, Deku would say, all right, you want it? Take it," as he would stand still and the Sludge villain would engulf Deku. This is when Mary Jane would say, "No, Deku, what are you?" As this is when immediately Deku would have lightning just charge off of his body, as the Sludge villain would get electrocuted with 1,000,000 volts. The Sludge villain would immediately just be like, "Ah!" as it would get off of Deku, and this is when All Might would arrive, as he would say, "I am here." To which All Might would basically meet Deku, and he would get an autograph along with Mary, and All Might would ask Deku what his quirk is. He would say it's sort of a spider quirk, and All Might would understand as he would jump off, and due to Deku not having actually having a quirk in this version, means that Deku won't even have to ask All Might, "Can I become a hero?" because he already knows he can. Deku is way too strong to not become a hero. Like, come on now. Anyways, this is when they'd basically go over to Deku's house, and this is when Mary would walk into the door. Mary Jane would walk in there. She would basically say, "Hey, Miss Parker," as Inko would look towards her, and she'd basically say, "Oh my God, hey, you never told me she was coming over, Deku." Deku would say that a little bit of a surprise, and he'd put his stuff down as they would have a normal dinner. And this is when we're now going to cover the 10-month training arc, which they both are, of course, going to train together. Deku would train her in hand-to-hand combat as well as himself, due to the fact that, of course, Mans has to learn that too. He spent the last couple of years just training on his abilities instead of focusing on how to actually fight. So Deku would use these 10 months to fight in hand-to-hand combat, and she would use this time to practice on her shape-shifting abilities. She's pretty OP at this point, and she can actually transform into not only other people but objects as well. She can even transform part of her body, kind of in atomic-y fashion. So yeah, that's basically how they both end up with the 10 months of training. I don't really have too much to cover in terms of that. I mean, there's no All Might or One for All, and they don't actually end up clearing the beach. Mirio ends up doing that with All Might, just due to the fact that he ends up getting it. And this is when we're both just kind of going to have them all go to the entrance exam. On this day, Deku and Mary would be dropped off by Inko, as she would say, "Good luck, you two," and Deku and her would look back as she would say, "Thanks," as they would end up walking inside, and of course Deku and her wouldn't trip, so there's no meeting Uraraka yet. So this is when they would go inside and take the written portion, to which Deku would completely ace, getting a perfect score, and she would get something similar. She'd get about 90-something% on the test. This is when they would go outside and take the practical portion of the exam, to which Deku would look at her and say, "You ready?" And she would say, "About as ready as I'll ever be," as this is when President Mike would say, "Go, go, go!" There's no countdowns in a real battle. Deku would grab her by the waist and literally swing himself over the gate, as he would throw her and she would go crashing into one of the villains. She would have ended up turning into a giant wrecking ball, and Deku and her would end up kind of tag teaming a bunch of villains. Deku and her would end up racking up about a solid 100 points respectively each, and Deku is just kind of having fun, just being pretty cocky, I guess you could say, kind of talking a little bit of smack to the villain, to the robots, even though they can't even hear him, just due to the fact that, as I said, Deku kind of has a little bit of a Peter personality. And yeah, Deku would end up kind of going through with this, just kind of beating on these robots left and right. Not a single one of them would stand a single chance. That is, until the 0-pointer would actually show up. As soon as Deku would hear the ground rumble, he would notice that there's a girl stuck under some rubble, and he would look towards Mary Jane as he would say, "You got it?" And she would say, "Of course I do." She would immediately start running over to Uraraka. She would begin to take the rubble off of her and save her. And as that's happening, Deku would literally just be swinging from building to building, getting to the 0-pointer's level. As Deku would say, "It's time to put you down." Deku would swing himself all the way up there, and in a sort of similar fashion to a little Superman punch, Deku would come in and say, "Smash!" Throwing a punch reminiscent to the one that he threw in the anime. He would send the what's called the 0-pointer crashing, and he would literally change the weather just like All Might does. After that, Deku would swing down onto the ground with his spider webs, and Deku would land perfectly safe. As this is when she would say that was a little sluggish for him, and Deku would say, "Come on, I did my best." Deku would immediately just be looked at by Uraraka, and she would just be like, As Deku would say, what? She would say, you're incredible. As Deku would say, don't mention it. I saw you needed helping. And, it's the right thing to do after all. And I mean, we are going to become heroes. As he would basically ask her if she's fine. They would take her to Recovery Girl. And they would say their goodbyes. As Deku and her would basically go off to their own things. They would end up going off to do their own little, separate things. And going off to Deku's house. As this is when she would ask Deku, what they're going to be doing tomorrow. As Deku would look at her and say, well, you're going to be getting part 2 of What If Deku Was Spider-Man tomorrow. Okay, so we start off our story right where we had left off. On the last part, I left off with the notion of Deku and MJ finishing off the entrance exams and going off to do their very own thing. During these couple of days that they had to kind of take a rest and kind of just chill, just have their own little things going on, they ended up, of course, getting their entrance acceptance letters. And this is when I said entrance acceptance. No, it's not that, but their UA acceptance letters. Now, this is when Deku would, of course, be home. When he would get a text from MJ saying that she just got her letter, did he get his? It's at this point that Deku would read that and be like, oh, I gotta go check. As he would, of course, go over to his mailbox and check. He'd send her a text back saying, yeah, I did. Want to open them together? As he and MJ would end up meeting each other at Deku's house, she would pull up about 10 minutes later, and Deku, Inko, and MJ would all open their letters together in a table. As this is when they would both be told that they, of course, got in, and Inko would immediately start celebrating, hugging the both of them, saying that she loves them both, and she would then kiss Deku and MJ on the foreheads, as she would say, all right, now where do you guys want to go out to eat? My treat. As Deku would look at his mom and say, Mom, you don't have to do this. As MJ would say, I kind of don't mind getting some food. Deku would start laughing, and this is when they would all basically end up going to Olive Garden. I mean, I like that place. They'd end up going to Olive Garden, and, Deku ends up getting the chicken Alfredo just because, bro, if you get anything other than the chicken Alfredo, what are you doing, bro? Like seriously, the chicken Alfredo is life. But yeah, Deku ends up getting that. MJ ends up getting same thing, and Inko ends up getting some weird adult thing that a lot of adults get weird things. They always try something new. I don't know what's up with that, but she ends up getting something new, and she ends up hating it just because why would you get something new if you already know what you like? But yeah, that aside, this is when Deku and everybody else would basically just end up that little night, and they would end up having the very next day to get ready for school. That same night, Deku would, of course, start ironing his clothes and just doing the things that most of us always do when it's time to go to our first day of school, right? Deku at this point would basically just start getting all ready, and this is when Deku would get his clothes, iron all that stuff. He'd have some breakfast, and this is when Deku would meet MJ at her door about 30 minutes before class starts. Deku would ask her if she wants to go swinging to school, and she would say of course she does, to which Deku would say, perfect, hold on. She would say, wait, I did my hair. As Deku would grab her, and they would start swinging through the air at max speeds over to UA. As this is when she would land, and Deku would as well. With them both having their hair a little frizzy, Deku would basically fix his back up into place, and he would hand MJ a brush, to which she would say, thank you. And they'd basically walk inside as Deku starts laughing uncontrollably. This is when they would walk inside, and they would then see the huge door of UA. They would look at that and immediately just be like, yeah, this is a pretty big door. Deku would say, I wonder if it's heavy. As he would grab it, and it would feel like a feather. Deku would open the door, and immediately they would be greeted to a blue-haired boy and a blondie just kind of sitting there arguing. This, of course, being Katsuki and Ida, who are both kind of yelling at each other due to, Bakugo being a little bit of a prick, and Ida just being a teacher's pet. This is when Deku and MJ would walk in, and they just be like, yeah, we're not sitting anywhere near that area. As Deku would say, how about we go sit towards the back? I mean, it's the best area. As MJ would be like, sure. As they would both go back there, this is when they would both have a pretty normal encounter up until a brown-haired girl would come in, or a brunette, I guess you could say. Uraraka, of course, she would walk inside and be like, hey, it's you two. I knew you guys were going to get into the school. She'd then be like, I honestly didn't know if I was going to be in the same class as you guys. As she'd start rambling, Deku would be like, yo, chill. And MJ would be like, yeah, I mean, we're just like you. She would then sit down right next to them, and this is when Deku would say, so, what's your quirk? And she would say, oh, my quirk is, but right as she's about to finish that sentence, Aizawa would then say, listen up, my name is Shota Aizawa. I am your first grade teacher. Throw these on and meet me outside. Deku would look towards Aizawa as he would say, so we're just not going to go to orientation? And he would say, there's no time for that stuff. If you really want to just get told about how great you are, I mean, you might as well go to class 1B, where all the rejects are at. As this one, Deku would say, wow, it's harsh. And Aizawa would then say, no, but seriously, throw these on and meet me outside. And this is when everybody would throw on the gym outfits, go to the locker rooms and get changed. Mineta would definitely try to look through that hole, but the second that Deku sees that, he would shoot his spider web straight at Mineta's eyes, and he would not be able to take them off for the life of him. Until Deku just starts laughing at him and says that that's what you get for trying to peep in on my girl. Mineta would say, I didn't know that with your girl, Deku. As Deku would just say, why are you calling me that? He would say, that's not your name? I heard Katsuki Bakugo calling you that. As Deku would immediately look towards Mineta, he would say, yeah, that's just a little nickname that he gave me. Kind of as something to be rude, I guess you could say. Mineta would look at Deku as he would say, oh, and he would apologize. He'd say, come on, just take it off of me. Deku would say, fine, as he would rip off the web from his face. They would then all meet outside with Aizawa, and this is when Aizawa would throw the ball at Deku's direction. Deku would catch it and palm it as he would say, what's with this? As Aizawa would tell Deku to throw it as far as he physically can. Deku would then look towards the sky and he'd say, so I can throw this as hard as I can? And Aizawa would say, yeah. Don't hurt yourself too bad. Deku would then smile, reel his arm back, and throw that straight into Hosu City. That thing would have gone far, like really far. Deku would have thrown it very, very, far, and he would have ended up throwing it all the way over to Hosu City. This is when everybody would be shocked, and they'd be like, this kid is so strong. As Aizawa would get that little smirk that he would have gotten from Deku and Canon, he would then end up thinking that this kid is incredible. As this is when everybody else would go up, and as soon as Bakugo sees that, he'd get angry, as he would say that he's gonna blow him out of proportion. He would then say that it's time to really show people what he's made of. As he would get into a little bit of a baseball stance, he would then say, all right, I'm going to throw this explosion in there and it should go far. He would reel his arm back and he would only end up getting about 700 to 800 meters. I'm saying this due to the fact that Bakugo is a little stronger in this version just because of that rival boost. That being said, though, this is when everybody else would go on to take their little exam stuffs, and they would all basically take on their quirk assessments. Deku and MJ would actually end up getting the two top best scores, and they would have definitely ended up getting a lot of improvements to their quirks, the way that they use them, just everything overall. Those 10 months were definitely useful. And yeah, they end up doing incredibly well in this version of events. MJ, of course, is not in the original version, but I added her to the story just due to the fact that I wasn't about to ship him with anybody if I could just add MJ to the story, right? Now, this is when they would both basically just get told by everybody that they did great, as everybody would start to say, so who got the worst? As Aizawa would then say, these are what you guys ended up scoring. He would then look towards Mineta as he would say, you are going to be expelled from UA. As Mineta would say, what? No, there's no way. You can't. As Aizawa would say, I'm kidding. That was just a normal ruse to see who was going to be expelled and to get you guys to try your best. As Momo would say that, yeah, guys, you guys didn't know. Like, Momo sounded so dumb when she said that, honestly, because Aizawa really could have expelled them all. Like, I don't know. That part where Momo says that kind of makes me angry at her, but whatever. Momo's a little teacher's pet when you really think about it. Some of you guys are probably in the comments typing up angry stuff like, how dare you say that about my queen, my empress? No. To all of you simps out there, I like Momo too, just not that much. I can definitely see the flaws in her character. Anyways, that being said, this is when they would both basically just look at each other, smile, and give each other a little, you feel me? As they would both basically end up just kind of finishing up with all this stuff. And this is when the little quirk exam day would basically end. It's at this point where they would both end up just going off home, and they would end up going to MJ's house, which they would have some, some dope dinner. And at this time, we are going to be switching our perspectives to Osborne. It's at this current moment that Osborne would be walking inside of his lab, the lab with a spider. And this is when he would have ended up basically just saying, I can't replicate it. I can't replicate the research. He would bang his hand on the desk as he would say that spider was everything. It was the finished copy, the product, but he just can't seem to replicate it. At this point, he would have ended up trying to create 1,000 spiders to try to create the same effect, but none of them would have worked. Their bodies were simply not strong enough to handle the toxin which the spider was injected with, and Osborne would just be freaking out, as it's at this current moment that Osborne would be in the room with the military officer just kind of walking in there with him. He would begin to say that he only has until tomorrow to find a project which will be well worth them purchasing, and Osborne at this point would freak out. Something very similar to the events of the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire would basically happen. I almost said Tommy, that's weird, but Tobey Maguire would basically happen, and Osborne would honestly have no choice. He needs to create something which can rival that, and up to this current moment, he hasn't exactly created a spider which can give those same results. The spider was a safer route. It would just modify your DNA code, but the toxin hasn't been tested. The side effects are still not calculated. They're still not sure of everything. This is when Osborne would decide that, if he doesn't do this now, he'll lose all of his assets. So he has only one choice: to inject himself with the gas. Or no, not inject, but to inhale the gas in the gas chamber. He would end up going inside, and the doctor who was right next to him, who was actually going to help him with the operation, would say that it's not safe. They should just wait, that, losing all of his assets is not worth maybe dying in this experiment. Osborne would grab him by the shirt as he would say that there's no time. They don't have any more time. He needs to do this now, or his company, everything that he's ever worked for, will fall under. As he would say, do you understand what that means to me? The doctor would then look at him and say, I don't. As this is when, basically the Green Goblin would look at him, or Osborne would say that, fine, I'll do it myself. As he would push him out of the way, he would then smash on the button, as he would then walk into the gas chamber, and he would immediately start the transformation of the Green Goblin. This would be a scene very reminiscent to that of the original Spider-Man movie with the Green Goblin being created. And after everything ended up happening, he would get buffed up. He would feel younger, stronger, faster, and even smarter. That toxin made him incredibly powerful. And if you guys thought that Deku's spider was OP, this toxin was as well. It's not like he was just going to make it like the original one. Original Green Goblin would be nothing but a joke in the My Hero verse. So yeah, this version of the Green Goblin was definitely buffed as well. So he ends up gaining abilities that actually do match Deku's spider abilities. He gains a healing factor which puts Deku's to shame. Strength far greater than Deku's. Enhanced stats, even beyond that of the spider, and his ability to analyze anybody's weak points. So he can immediately look at someone and analyze their weaknesses and weak spots. This toxin, the gas, the Green Goblin, was something that would put the spider to shame. It was far more powerful. However, it did come with its downsides. He would lose his sanity. His sanity would go down after every single time that he uses it, and this is the worst case scenario for it. This is when everything would basically start playing out kind of similar to how it did in the movies. Osborne would start to freak out and lose his sense of self, and at this point he would end up destroying the scientists who helped him create the Green Goblin toxin, being even more powerful than the original. His costume, you guys may be wondering, what's his costume going to be like? It's definitely going to be very similar to that of the one from the movie. However, it is going to be futuristic just due to the fact that these events happen way later than the version that happened in the Green Goblin. Their tech is far greater than anything that, the Spider-Man verse has in the movies. So yeah, everything is going very, very great. Now, at this point, even though Deku is kind of just relaxing with MJ at home, his greatest rival, the Goblin, is born. Deku and MJ would basically at this point end up having a relatively normal couple of days. The next 3 days of school would be very normal, and no really noteworthy events would honestly be going down at this point. This is when they would both just kind of be going to classes and kind of just having dates here and there, with everything kind of playing out as you would expect like normal teen relationship to happen, as well as UA days. Everything would be kind of boring. However, this is when everything would change, when at the last day of the third day, All Might would bust in through the door saying, "I am here!" As Deku and everybody else would be in shock. They'd say, "All Might!" And Deku, even though he's still a fanboy of All Might, our boy Deku, even though, he saw him earlier, so he's not that freaked out about it. He's like, "All Might, you're teaching at UA?" All Might would say, "Yes, young man." As he would then say, "What is your name?" Deku would say, "Izuku Parker," and Alma would then say, "All right, young Parker, well, we have a lot to do today, so all of you guys need to go put these suits on because the clothes make the pros." As all of them would basically get suited up, and we would then have a very dope scene with Deku walking out with his costume. This is where you guys are going to get the first look at what Deku's costume is. When Deku walks into the changing room, he doesn't exactly take out a costume. Deku's costume has always been with him. Deku would immediately like use the genetics of the symbiote, and from his skin alone, a weird black substance would begin to cover his body. As this is when Deku would have a costume on him, and this would be the one that you guys will be seeing up on screen at this current moment. The color would be black, red, and white. It is actually made by Blue Keith himself. He was the one who ended up creating the costume for this version of Deku. And if I have to say so personally, I honestly think that this costume design is honestly awesome. Like the color scheme, the white, the black, the red, and the lines, it all looks dope to me. And he of course has the hoodie. So this is basically what Deku's costume is going to look like. A little bit similar to Miles Morales, if I do say so myself, but it is dope in and of itself. That being said, Deku would walk outside with this costume, and immediately people would look at him and be like, whoa. Kaminari would walk up to Deku and be like, dude, this costume is awesome. How did you get it? I didn't even see you change. Deku would say, oh. As the mask would disappear from his face, he would say, kind of made it myself. As Kaminari would be like, dude, that is awesome. He would fist bump Deku, and everybody would end up going outside. To which MJ would see Deku's costume again for the millionth time, and she'd say, that old thing again. Couldn't you have changed the costume? Deku would say, come on, I like it. And she would say, yeah, I liked it too about the first 100 times, but now it kind of feels like it's getting old. Deku would say, all right, let me change a couple things. And he would add a couple new things to the costume. And yeah, the man would be looking drippy. Drip is an understatement, honestly. He would be looking very, very fire. It's at this point that Deku would, of course, at this point, I said at this point way too many times, but Deku would at this point essentially just kind of go over to All Might, to which All Might would basically look at all the students and tell them all that they are now going to start picking out lots for who they are going to be teamed up against. They are going to be having an event called the Heroes versus Villains. He would begin to explain everything, and this is when it would all be decided. The teams will be as follows: Deku and MJ. You guys knew that was coming. Don't act like you didn't. Versus Bakugo and Ida. As soon as this was announced, Deku's eyes would widen, and Bakugo would look at Deku with a sort of confused look on his face. He would think that it's about time he finally gets this rematch, and not only will he finally defeat Deku, but I'll do it in front of all these people. Deku's been training for this moment. Or no, Bakugo, not Deku, but Bakugo's been training for this moment, and he's finally going to put this training to use. Deku would look towards Bakugo and give him a little bit of a smile, as he would give him some thumbs up and tell him to try his best. Bakugo would scoff at this notion and tell Four Eyes to come on, let's go. As Ida would walk over with Bakugo and say, hey, you need to show some more respect to your fellow classmates. Bakugo would say, whatever, nerd, and they would then end up going away. It's at this point where they would decide to basically end up going up to the top, and Ida and Bakugo would have similar encounter to what they did in the original, except this time Bakugo would tell him to guard the bomb instead of just to stay here, to stay out of his way. He would then tell Ida that he's going to be handling Spider Boy, and you can handle the shapeshifter if you can. As Bakugo would start laughing, and he would then walk away. This is when Deku and MJ would both just look at each other as they would say, so what's the plan, at the same time. As they would both smile and chuckle, they would then say, who are we kidding? We know exactly what the plan is. Deku would smile, and they would both kind of telepathically know what's going on. Not exactly telepath, but they both kind of know what they're thinking. They both have a sort of sync nature. They're both so similar that they just know what they're going to be doing. It's at this point that Deku and MJ would look towards each other, and they would then start walking inside, as they're really having nothing to think about. This is when Deku would see that things are getting a little boring, honestly, and MJ would say that she can definitely agree with that. Deku would then say that, she should go off to find the bomb room, and he'll just stay behind and handle Bakugo, seeing as he knows that that's coming. MJ would say, yeah, I know it's coming. You sure you don't want me to put him in his place? As Deku would say that, nah, it won't be necessary. MJ would say, all right, and she'd say, well, see you on the flip side, as she would, basically continue walking. This one we would then hear, Deku, coming from far away from the tunnels, as he would say, you're dead, as this is when he would come in with an explosion, blasting away at Deku. But immediately as he does, Deku would spin out of the direction. He would then know that Bakugo's about to do something that he would have never expected. Bakugo would spin midair and start turning into a little bit of a tornado, as he would say, fire a spiral cannon, as he would immediately basically start shooting explosions in every direction. Deku would immediately fall under Bakugo, and he would hold his hands over his face as the impact would cover him just barely. This is when Bakugo would land on top of the roof. He would then blast himself over to Deku. Deku would jump away doing a backflip, as he would then say, "Too slow." This is when we would then have Bakugo saying, "Ugh," and he would then rush at Deku as he would say, "AP shot." He would then shoot a bunch of those at Deku as Deku would start dodging and going over each and every single one of the shots. Deku would then say that he has something very similar to that, as he would shoot acid shots at both of Bakugo's gauntlets, which would render them useless. And this is when Deku would, shoot a web at Bakugo's arms. He would close them together, tie him up, shoot a web at his mouth, eyes, and ears, and he would just say, "Alright, I captured Bakugo." As he would tell MJ that, she would say, "Yeah, tell me why you took a little longer than I thought you would." Deku would say that he was just giving Bakugo some hope, as Bakugo at this point would just be like, "Brr, brr," just caught up in everything. This one, everybody would say, "Dude, that kid is awesome. His powers and Quirk is amazing." This is when everybody would begin to discuss how awesome his powers are. And this is when Deku would then proceed to basically climb up, as he would then open a window and he would start using his spider crawling ability to go up all the way to where MJ's at. She would say that she's at the door, and Deku would say that that's perfect. Bust in, and I'll bust in through the window while he's not looking. Ida would then hear a knock at the door, as she'd say, "Pizza delivery." Ida would say, "That's weird, I didn't order any," as immediately she would bust through the door, and the door would go over to hit Ida. As Ida would get knocked over, this is when Deku in that split moment would turn invisible, open the window as he would crawl into the room, go over to the bomb and touch it, getting them both to be the winner. As at that moment, Ida had barely been waking up from the impact, and they would have ended up winning that entire battle. This is when they would both be like, "Oh, that was perfect." As MJ would run over to Deku. Deku would catch her by the waist, and he would then say, "So, I think that definitely deserves a little bit of a celebratory date." She would say, "Where are you gonna take me?" As Deku would say, "I was talking about for me." And she would say, "Yeah, no, you owe me one." As Deku would just say, "Fine." He'd say, "How about we go to our favorite coffee shop?" As MJ would say, "I'm down." And this is when they would both end up leaving UA. A couple of hours later, they'd basically end up leaving, and this is when they would both end up going over to their houses to get ready. MJ would be telling Deku to meet him there at 5, and Deku would have, of course, been getting drippy at this moment. Deku looks exactly like what he does in the thumbnail, and Deku would end up throwing on a little hoodie, some pants, and some shoes. Just casual outfit, right? MJ would have done as well, and Deku would then just swing over to her house, as he would end up picking up a box of chocolate and flowers. He would have ended up just throwing the money to the people, and he would have used his webs to shoot him over to himself. As he would end up swinging over to MJ's house, he would immediately go in through the window and ask her if she's ready, as he would see her, and he doesn't see a scene that's very PG-13. Deku would say, "Oh," as MJ would say, "Not now," as Deku would say, "Fine," and he would then go outside as he would wait for her, and he'd say, "Well, after this day, I better get something," and she would say, "You sure will, but you gotta wait for it," as Deku would say, "Perfect," as it's at this point that they would both end up basically going to the coffee shop, and they would end up having an honestly amazing date. They'd have a pretty good time just talking with each other, and they'd both just be reminiscing on their first time that they ever came here, when Deku was a little shyer, and he ended up asking MJ on a date. She would say that it was so cute how shy he was and how he basically didn't know what to say. He seemed to have zero confidence. Deku would say, stop making fun of him, and MJ would start laughing. It's at this moment that Deku would do that as well, but out of the corner of his eyes, he would see a sort of weird orb coming at their direction. This is when Deku would say, "Get down," as immediately he would move at top speeds, as he would grab MJ and cover her, as immediately he would suit up. And his suit would cover the explosion, as Deku would ask her if she's okay. This is when the Green Goblin would be up in disguise, as he's throwing bombs at every direction, just trying to get the attention of the military councilman. As at this current moment, they're actually having a little bit of a festival, just like in Spider-Man 1. I know a lot of you guys are like, "Dude, this is not even MHA. You might as well just be ripping off the story." But I mean, come on now, bro. Like, this is just fire. Like, I want to do this, so this is what I'm gonna do. Anyways, this is when Deku would basically look over to that direction of the Green Goblin, and he would immediately shoot a web at the propulsor, the jet thing that he has. As he would swing over there, as he would then throw a punch at the Goblin, he would then hurt his hand, as he would say, "What?" He would have thrown a full power one at that, and the Goblin would just literally tank that thing. The armor would have absorbed most of the hit, And this is when the goblin would literally punch Deku straight in the gut, sending him crashing into a building. He would have smashed all the way through it, and Deku would then get up as he would say, I'm gonna be feeling that one for the next week. The goblin would then go over to Deku and throw a bunch of explosions at him, as Deku would then use his metal webbings to create a shield in front of himself. He would then use that as he would grab the piece of webbing that he created and fling it at the goblin. The goblin would literally be going right at it as he would jump off of the jet, and he would then land on top of the metal pieces. He would run over it and get back on his, equipment. This is when he would shoot a bunch of little bat things, the ones that Harry used in Spider-Man 3, as Deku would immediately get cut by a couple of those. This is when Deku would then decide that it's time to stop playing. Black webbing would then come in out of nowhere, and it would start overtaking the suit as Deku would shoot a giant amount of webs at the goblin. The webs would then light on fire as he would have actually ended up catching him, but the fire would do absolutely nothing, as it's at this point that Deku would end up frying the entire suit by shoving 1,000,000 volts straight into it. As the goblin would then be, short-circuited for a while, it would restart itself and it would rip off the web before Deku could even increase the lightning on it. As it's at this point that the goblin would end up blitzing over towards Deku using his speed, as he would have ended up jumping off of the jet propulsor. He would end up basically landing in front of Deku as he would grab him by the throat, slam him into a building. He would then say, listen kid, how about you stay out of what doesn't concern you? As Deku would then say, no, get away from here, MJ, as MJ would have actually been coming in right behind him. She would have barely ended up getting up to the building, and she would then, basically she would turn her hand into a scythe and cut one of the goblin's legs off, as immediately the leg would regenerate, but the armor wouldn't. As he would then turn towards her direction, Deku would then say, no, run! As it's at this point that the goblin would smile inside of the suit, Osborne would, and he would then throw a bomb straight at her, as Deku would say, no! The bomb would go off and she would be thrown off of the building, as she would be in critical condition. Deku would think that she died, and it's at this moment that Deku would tears would just start overrunning himself, and he would grab the goblin's hand as he would say, get away from her, as he would rip his hand off. He would then punch the goblin as hard as he physically could straight through 3 buildings, as he would then shoot spiderwebs straight at him, as he would run into him and he would hit him, as he would have the goblin's head spin, cracking itself, as the goblin would then drop onto the ground, and Deku would think that he finally did the job. It's at this moment that he would have realized what he had just done, and he would then fall to his knees, as in that split second the goblin would regenerate and he would rise back, as he would then step on Deku's skull. He would then start repeatedly smashing into it, as Deku would start crying out for help. This is when a bunch of pro heroes would arrive on the scene, and this is when Osborne would finally snap back into reality. He would have realized what he was doing, and Deku's mask would have been ripped to shreds at this point. The piece of the costume that was on it, he would see that he was killing a kid, and it's at this moment that he would say, what was I doing? He would then realize everything that just happened, and it's at this moment that the goblin would look around, as he would see Endeavor All Might around him, and he would then say, I did this. As he would then look towards both of his hands, he would realize what just happened in this situation. As he would jump away using his jet to get the hell out of that situation, he would then immediately run off, as Deku and MJ would immediately get rushed over to the hospital. And this is where we're going to be ending the part for what if Deku was... We start our story off with Deku and MJ getting rushed to the hospital. Immediately after everything had happened, a bunch of pro heroes would have swarmed the area. This meaning Endeavor, All Might, Midnight, people like that would immediately just get to the scene. As this is when the Green Goblin would hop onto his little device and he would basically just leave. He would flee the area as quickly as he possibly can, just freaking out mentally like, what did he just do? And why does he innately know how to use this thing? He would have a weird voice in his head, and out of nowhere, he would suddenly pass out. He would wake up back in his house a couple of hours later, and he would start freaking out. But this one we will now be cutting back to our perspectives to Deku. This is when Deku and MJ would arrive back in the hospital about 10 minutes later. They would both be in really bad shape, but since MJ doesn't have a healing factor, she's actually way worse off than Deku is. She doesn't have no way to regenerate these things as fast as Deku does, and it's going to take her a lot longer for her to heal back to how she was. If at all, she may lose her ability to walk, and that's something that she may have to live with. However, this one we will now basically chark over to them both getting rushed over to the hospital. Deku's eyes would open just barely as he would then pass out unconscious. And after about 3 hours would pass, Deku would finally wake up, breathing heavily as he would ask, "Where's MJ?" Immediately the doctor would look at him and say, "Good, you're awake." "Nurse!" As he would immediately just begin to call everybody into the room. They would then begin to basically perform a little bit of things on Deku. They would inject him with IV fluids and all this stuff, and this is when Deku would start getting healed up by the doctor. Recovery girl would walk inside, and she would then give Deku a kiss, which would start healing up Deku's healing process even faster. But the damage he took, that was not a completely different level. His body is completely mangled. Those explosives, they're nuke level in a tiny little bomb. That thing could kill a person easily. And this is when Deku would basically say, "Where's MJ?" As they would begin to tell him again, she's in critical condition. Deku, after hearing this, after a little bit of getting healed up, he would try to get up, but he can't. And Deku would just sit there with thoughts racing through his head. He would just be wondering how she is. Did she survive? It's his fault. It's his fault. He knew he should have never went out that day. They should have just went to his house. If only none of this would have ever happened. They would have been home right now doing absolutely nothing like always. It's his. But this is when they would then finally inject him with a little fluid, which would cause Deku to pass out again. Due to the fact that if Deku's freaking out like this, his body may not recover in the way that it usually should. He would wake up about 6 hours later, and Deku would finally be able to rip off all of the IV fluids and everything that he had on himself. As he would have that little hospital gown on him, he would then start to step outside, carrying the little machine, which he would use to basically lean on. Deku would start to limp over to MJ's room, and this is when Deku would see how bad it is. He would see her in a way that he's never seen her before. Immediately, he would hold his hand, he would cover his mouth with his hand as tears would begin to run down his face, as he would fall to his knees and say, "Why? MJ, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please forgive me." He would just fall onto his knees and bang on the floor as a nurse would come in out of nowhere and she'd say, "Hey, come on, we gotta get you back to your room. You're in no condition to be acting like this." Deku would be silent. No words, no thoughts, just, it's his fault. This is when Deku would arrive back to the room, and for the next hours, he would just have one thought in his head. He's not immortal. He can feel pain just like everybody else. He can still die just like anybody else can. Just because nobody's ever been able to touch him ever since he finally awakened his quote-unquote quirk, he believes. He thought that he was unbeatable, untouchable. It seemed as if he was too powerful to ever be touched by even All Might himself, but today was a reality check. Deku isn't immortal. Deku isn't a god. Deku's just a normal kid. A normal kid with too much power to realize it. And Deku would finally realize that with great power comes even bigger responsibilities. He can't just be putting people in his life through pain like this. And he would start having a very twisted view of what that means. This is when Deku would feel one thought going across his head. He would think, "I'll never let anybody get hurt like this ever again. Or die. MJ could die because of me. Because of my weakness. That'll never happen again." Deku would have one thought going through his head as well. He's not the strongest as he thought. He's nothing but immortal. Deku never viewed himself like that for a while, and this was a big reality check for him. He would lay back down and sleep it off until the very next days would go by. 4 days would then go by after this, and Deku would finally return to school. After being healed fully, mentally and physically. The mental part would have definitely taken the longest due to the fact that that was the hardest part to get over. His body would have ended up healing about 4 hours after he went to MJ's room, but his mind was completely shattered. MJ was the one thing in his life that kept him grounded. And without her, he just doesn't know how to feel. It's hard. Deku would go over to the hospital and he would drop off some flowers to MJ and talk to her. Tell her that she's going to be alright and that Deku will always be here to visit her. But this one Inko would come into the room and tell Deku that he's going to be late if he doesn't go now. As Deku would kiss her on the forehead, he would then walk off, get in the bus, and he would then finally arrive to UA. He would walk inside, and this is when everybody would look at him with a weird, kind of empathetic look. They would all look at him and kind of feel bad for him. Deku would sit back in the back of the classroom, and he would just kind of stay quiet. As this is when Aizawa would walk into the room, and he would look towards Deku as he would nod to him, tell him that he heard about what happened. He's sorry about what happened to MJ, but class must continue. As he would tell them all that they're going to need to get their stuffs because they are going to go to the USJ event. Everybody would begin to get a little happy, and some people would go over to Deku, as Uraraka would. She would tell Deku to not worry about it. MJ will be fine. They have the best doctors in the world working on her. And there's no way that she's going to get hurt. She will be fine. Trust her. Trust the doctors. MJ will be fine. Positive thoughts is all they need, and prayers. Deku would look at her, give her a little bit of a weird smile, and then say, yeah. And at this point, I'm going to cover what happened with Osborne. As I had said, Osborne would arrive home and a weird voice would snap into his mind. He would wake up a couple of hours later and say, What happened? As he would start getting brief flashbacks of all of the events that had occurred. Osborne would slam a table over to the other side of the room with incredible strength, as he would then say, what happened to me? As a weird, ominous voice would come in from the background, it would say, no, what happened to us? The voice would start laughing maniacally, and Osborne would say, who are you? Who's there? He would start looking around every single corner, every single corridor, everything that he can see. He would start searching, but nothing. He would say, he must be the smartest man in the world, and for what? You don't even know where I'm at. I'm in your head. As Osborne would say, no. He would then say, it was you. You caused me to do all of that. I would have never. As the voice would then snap back at him and say, oh, but you would, Osborne. You would. This is what you are. These are the emotions that you don't let out to the public eye, but this is how we truly are on the inside. We're a monster, a goblin. As, Osborne would scream, no, and the voice would start driving him insane. It would completely just destroy his mental state, and it would finally convince Osborne that he truly is the bad guy that everybody says he is. This is when we're now finally going to switch over to the scene with the USJ and Deku inside of the car. But at that point, the goblin would start to laugh maniacally, and he would finally start upgrading his gear. This is when, for the next couple of days, or weeks actually, the goblin will be working on that. And now, for Deku will be basically on the bus, as this is when they would finally arrive to the USJ. But before they would walk inside, Deku would feel a sort of weird presence. Deku would go over to Aizawa and tell him that there's something in there, but Aizawa would look at Deku as he would say that the perimeter was cleared about an hour ago. There's no way anybody got inside. 13 was in there. Just don't worry about it. Your quirk may be malfunctioning or something, but, it doesn't seem like there will be anything in there. Deku would walk inside, kind of with a weird expression on his face, as he would be thinking that there's no way he just didn't listen to him. There's no way he would just throw his ideas in the back of his mind. And Aizawa, of course, would have been hoping for the best, but he would definitely be thinking about what Deku said. It's at this point that they would basically walk inside, and immediately, as soon as 13 begins to give her speech, Kurogiri would open a portal. As immediately Deku would see this portal, he would say, no, I knew it. As immediately villains would start to drop in on every location that would have happened in canon, and Deku would immediately shoot a web at Kurogiri, as he would fling himself over to it and kick Kurogiri down before he even gets a chance to teleport anybody around. Deku at this point would shoot webs, a bunch of them, at all of the villains. He would shoot electric volt webs with 2 million volts each, just completely frying each and every single one of the villains that he could get a hold of. And he would start swinging from area to area, completely just decimating each and every person, using his max top speed to just obliterate villain after villain, mangling these villains. He would show no signs of mercy, breaking legs, arms, and even some paralyzing them. Deku went through that entire section and told them all that he was going to show no mercy, just in the way that they showed him none. Cobra Kai reference. Anyways, this is when Deku would basically proceed to continue going in there, and Aizawa would scream at Deku to stop this. This is not the image of a hero that a hero should portray. These villains are bad, yes, but he can't be paralyzing these guys. Aizawa would say that after realizing what Deku had done to one of the men, and he would basically scream that out to Deku, as Deku would say that he's doing what has to be done, what they won't do. as Deku would continue to pummel down on more and more villains until he finally arrives to the area where Aizawa was getting his head beaten by the Nomu. Deku would be beating that section, and as soon as he's done, Shigaraki would be screaming, "No, no, no, it's not fair. This kid, he can't win." He would say, "Nomu, kill that brat." As immediately the Nomu would come in and punch Deku right in the face, as Deku would not move an inch. Deku would look towards the Nomu and give him a death stare, as immediately Deku would say that there will be no mercy. As immediately he would jump on top of the Nomu, hug it with all of his strength, and he would release all of the voltage, 100 million volts. The Nomu would turn into sheer dust, and Shigaraki would have been just completely taken out by that attack. This is when Kurogiri would go over to Shigaraki, as Shigaraki was barely hit with a tiny little bit, meaning that he got hit with like almost let's say he got hit with 3 million volts, right? Because he was pretty far away. But Deku did that, and Shigaraki would end up getting away with Kurogiri. Deku, after taking the Nomu down, would then look towards Shigaraki as he was getting away and say, "Oh no, you don't!" As Shigaraki would get terrified, he would say, "Kurogiri, now!" As this is when Aizawa would arrive, and he would wrap Deku up with a scarf as he would say, "That's enough, Parker. You need to stand down." Deku would look towards Aizawa as he would say, "Get off of me!" And he would rip off the bandages off of himself as he would look towards Aizawa and tell him that he let them get away. Aizawa would look at Deku and he would say, "I stopped you from doing something that you were going to regret. You haven't killed anybody yet. But if you do, I will be forced to put you down." Deku would look at Aizawa and say, "You can try it, but now you're the villain." As he would look towards Aizawa and he would rush at him, as immediately he would take down Aizawa and trap him with a bunch of his own webbings. 13 would try to stop Deku, but Deku would have just closed her, completely surrounded her with metal webbing, which she just could not break. And he would have ended up charging it up with electric bolts. So 13 ended up getting passed out. This is when immediately after he took care of 13, All Might would bust in through the room. And he would see everything completely devastated. All Might would see what the area was looking like and immediately just look towards Deku's direction as he would say, "Did you do this?" Deku would look towards All Might as he would say, "And what if I did? What are you going to do, All Might? You going to hit one of the students? Huh?" As All Might would look towards Deku, he would look down at the ground, look at all the carnage which is before him, and he would then say that he needs to stop. All Might would walk in, see everything, and Deku would look towards All Might as All Might would put his hand on his shoulder. He would say, "I understand what you're going through, young Parker, but this is not the way to go about it. Come with me." Deku would look at All Might and say, "No, this is the way to go about it. You're all deluded. You all don't understand. You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't understand the hell that I've been going through. MJ's in the hospital because of me, because I was too weak to stop the villains. And you mean to tell me that your flawed justice system is going to bring them in? Well, I'm not going to stop until that goblin character is taken down. And he pays. I'm going to send him straight off to hell. Just like the rest of these guys." He would aim his shooter straight at one of the villains and shoot him with a bunch of bolts. As the villain would drop down to the ground, he would start just kind of wincing in pain. As All Might would look at Deku and say, "That's enough." Deku would say that no, it's not. As he would immediately turn himself invisible, leave the area. All Might would just stand there as he would think that that kid is going down the wrong path. All Might would not know what to do. He's never had to deal with a situation like this. Deku would walk away from the situation, just web sling away from there. And this is when Deku would finally start taking in everything that just happened. He just broke the law. A million thoughts would start going through Deku's head, and he would start repenting all the actions that he just took. But he would then think that, well, what's done is done. There's nothing he can do about it now. He has to go through with it. Take down the goblin for MJ. That's what she would have wanted. And oh my god, Deku, you are so wrong for that. That is definitely not what MJ would have wanted. So, yeah, now let's go back into the story. I had to just add that little part. Anyways, Deku would realize that he's probably going to be searched by a bunch of pro heroes now. I mean, he just broke the law. There's no way that Deku will be able to go back to his house now. Deku would go over to his house, grab all of his belongings in a backpack, grab a carton of water bottles, and end up going to the abandoned warehouse where he and MJ would have trained when they were kids, a long time ago. That thing would have been closed off to the normal people, but there would have been one easy access point to it. Something that Deku could have easily gotten to. The roof. And there was even a part that MJ and he custom made. A little bit of a secret area, I guess you could say. They would have had some laptops. They installed some internet there due to Deku's just enhanced intelligence. I mean, I forgot to mention this, but Deku is incredibly intelligent. He's very ignorant, but intelligent at that. And Deku would then start using the tech that they had there to find out who the goblin is and how we can find him, how to track him down. But he would find nothing. Nothing at all. 2 days would go by and Deku would get angrier and angrier as he would then begin to have thoughts and just decide to relax. He would lay down on the couch that he and her had there, the one that they use for a lot of purposes. Deku would lay down and grab a picture of MJ from his wallet as Deku would say, "How I miss you." He would look towards that picture as he would say, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it now. Guess I gotta live with what happened." Deku would proceed to basically just start having thoughts race in his head. He would then think that as soon as he takes down the goblin, he'll face the consequences for what he did, but he can't go turning himself in now. Somebody needs to stop him, and All Might won't be able to. The power that he displayed, it was far more powerful than anything that he had ever seen All Might do. And from what he can tell, he's been declining. This is when Deku would continue the search, but finds nothing. No clues, no names, nothing. Deku would get angry and flip the table as he would then start wrecking the entire place. His anger would begin to get the best of him and Deku would finally just have enough. Deku would decide that if he can't find him through this means, he's just gonna have to find him on the streets. This is when Deku would go on a sort of vigilante-esque type stuff and he would create a different sort of looking suit for himself. Very different than the one that you guys saw on my community tab. I know yesterday's part I didn't end up actually including the Deku hero costume, but that is because your boy kind of forgot. I'm not gonna lie, I forgot about that part and I totally forgot to edit that in there when I was editing the video. But you know, you guys can go see the costume if you guys look at my community tab. It will be the newest post there. So yeah, if you guys want to know what goes on with that, basically just look at my community tab, and I'm pretty sure most of you guys already have. So yeah, anyways, at this time the students were all doing their USJ events and Deku was still searching for the villains. Deku was still searching for Goblin. At this point, Deku's been very brutal with all the villains that he's been taking down, and he searches a bunch of people. Every night he would basically go by a bunch of muggers. He would sometimes stop some big organizations, but most of the time it was nothing but petty thieves. Every now and then he would have to fight a battle, which seems like a little bit of a hassle, but well, for Deku it was nothing. Deku would finally start realizing that he's not gonna find anything like this, but he can't give up. It's for MJ. At this point, Deku still hasn't went to go visit her just due to the fact that he's too busy looking for the goblin. And yeah, at this point, they're all having the UA Sports Festival event. Inko's worried sick for Deku, and Deku's been going many nights, losing countless hours of sleep and not eating right. Deku's struggling. Although his body is superhuman, he's not immortal, as he already knew before, but Deku's completely disregarding that notion right now. And Deku would continue to do things as he is now. Deku would continue to find nothing and roam the street for more weeks on end. And this is when the UA Sports Festival would have ended. They would have already done their internships events. Everything that you guys would expect would go by as it did in canon. And this is when we will finally have the forest training arc. To which at this point, the students will all be in the forest. And it will now be the day, the fateful night where everything happened. At this point, Deku would start breaking down in his hideout. As Deku would tear up looking at the picture of MJ and just say that he can't do it. He can't find him. Where are you, Goblin? Where are you? He would scream out to the heavens as he doesn't know. He can't find him. There's not a clue. There's nothing. He would destroy the laptop and then decide that, well, he failed her. He would decide that he's going to go visit her if nothing else. And he would then throw on a hoodie and some jeans to cover his face up. Deku would begin to walk over to the hospital very slowly and making sure that he doesn't pass by any pro heroes. This is when Deku would finally arrive to the location of the hospital, and Deku would go invisible as he would start sneaking in through everything until he finally arrives at MJ's room. This is when Deku would walk inside with no doctors around, and he would notice that MJ's there. He would see her awake. Her eyes are open. Deku would say, "Hey MJ, As MJ would look around the room and see nothing, she would say, "Are you there, Deku?" Deku would say, "I am, but I can't be here right now." And she would say, "Why not?" Deku would say that, there's reasons for that. As he would turn off the invisibility cloak to talk to MJ for a bit, she would look at him and say, "How have things been?" Deku would look at her and say, "Good. I mean, everything's been good at UA." And she would say, "Yeah, it sure looks like it. Come on, don't lie to me. I can tell when you're lying. And are you really this bad because you're worried for me?" She would crack a joke and start laughing at Deku's expenses. Deku would smile a little bit and say, "Yeah, a little something like that." She would ask what's been going on since she's been out, and Deku would look at her as he would say, "A lot." He would look down at the ground and she would understand what Deku means. She would tell him that it doesn't look like he doesn't seem like he's himself. And to be honest, he doesn't feel like himself either. Deku would look at her and say, "To be honest with you, MJ, a lot of things have been going on. A lot." He would then begin to tell her everything about what happened at the USJ, how he snapped, how he's been searching for the goblin and trying to bring him down. He's gonna kill him if it's the last thing he does. MJ would look at Deku and put her hands in his face as he would say, "That's not who you are. You're different than that. You're kind. You're heroic. You're better. Maybe you're not the #1 hero yet, but someday you will be, and this isn't the example that you should be showing. If you're not gonna be better for yourself, be better for me. This isn't what I would have wanted, dummy. I never would have wanted you to go countless nights or to not be with your mother. Come on, Inko's worried sick. It's not just about me. It's about all of us." She would look towards Deku and smile. Deku would as well, and he would pull in for a hug. As this is when immediately they would hear on the TV that's in MJ's room, a news little station is going off, as it's currently saying that All Might and All For One are having an all-out battle. She would look towards Deku's direction as she would say, "You gotta go help him. There's no way he'll be able to handle the battle. Look at it." At this point, All Might would be at the losing end. This is right after All For One told him about Shigaraki being Nana Shimura's grandson. Deku would look at her. She would say, "I don't know. I'm not exactly on good terms with the heroes right now." As she would say, "Come on. It's not about that right now. It's about doing what's right now. Go get him, Spidey." As Deku would smile at her direction, he would then say, "All right, I'll be back, but don't miss me too much." As immediately Deku would turn on the invisibility cloak and he would swing from building to building at his max speed, running from top to top of the buildings as fast as he can, as he would arrive in about 1 minute to the fight with All For One and All Might. Deku would land right beside All Might as All For One would say, "If it isn't the Spider Boy. I saw the articles on the news." Deku would then look towards All Might as he would completely ignore All For One and say, "So, what's the deal with this guy? What are his abilities?" All Might would say, "Kid, what are you doing here? This isn't the place to be." As All For One would shoot a blast at All Might, Deku would create meta webbing in front of them, which would stop the beam from coming at them. And Deku would then look at All Might as he would say, "Look, All Might, I know we're not on the best terms, but right now, you have to trust me." All Might would look at Deku as he would say, "Kid, I don't know." And Deku would say, "Please, All Might, trust me." All Might would look at Deku's direction and say, "All right, kid, I trust you." Deku would look at All Might and say, "All right then, this is what we're gonna do." Start our story off right where we had left off on the last part. At this point, Deku had barely just landed there, and he would look towards All Might as he would immediately grab All Might, who was actually about to get hit with a huge attack. He would swing out of that direction, and he would then look towards All Might as he would say, "All Might, I'm here." All Might would look towards Deku as he would say, "What are you doing here, kid?" Deku would look at All Might and say, "Look, I know we're not on the best terms right now, but you need my help, and I can't let you die, All Might." All Might would look towards Deku as he would say, "Kid, I don't know about this." And Deku would just look at All Might as he would say, "You have to trust me." This is when All For One would shoot another attack at them, a wind pressure one, to which Deku would create a prison he would use his metal webbing to create a little bit of a barrier between them, which would block the entirety of the attack. And Deku would then look towards All Might as he would say, "All Might, we can't do this if there's no trust. You have to trust me. It's the only way we're going to defeat this guy." All Might would look towards Deku as he would say, "All right, I trust you." We would then have Deku smile as he would grab onto Deku's hand and say, alright then, All Might, get ready. He would swing All Might at All For One, as All For One would put both of his arms in front of him in an X position. He would then block the attack from All Might, as All Might would then say, United States of Smash! And it's at this point that All For One would block the attack by contesting it with his own blow. They would both be going back and forth like over and over as they were in the anime. And this is when Deku would immediately turn invisible, as it's at this point that Deku would decide that he needs to surround the area quickly. He would create a giant like sort of dome around them with metal webbing, which would actually cover the entire area. And this is when Deku would smile and go invisible. After, he would create a bunch of webs all over the floor to have it so that he makes absolutely no noise, and he would appear behind All For One, as this is when Deku would just appear behind All For One, look at All Might and say, get out of here. As All Might would get away from the blow, he would be able to dodge it. His arm would end up being almost fully destroyed, and Deku would then immediately just say, hey. As All For One would turn towards Deku's direction, immediately Deku would use all of the volts of electricity that he can. He would have ended up coating himself with the layer of electricity on his hand, and he would have just let it all out on All For One, which would immediately just obliterate All For One. He would be atomized from that, and this is when All For One's body would just drop straight to the ground. He was done for. This means that Shigaraki will not be getting All For One. Therefore, he's never going to be a threat later on. Now, and it's at this point that all this is going down, that the news is broadcasting everything that's going down. As everything has been happening, the Goblin would actually be on his TV at Oscorp. He would have seen everything that just went down. And after he sees all of this, he would smile as he begins to go to his chamber and start getting suited up. After this, Deku would take down the webbing that was around him, holding everything away. And Deku would then grab All Might as he would pick him up and help him get onto his feet. He would then hold up All Might's hand as All Might would lift up his fist while, leaning on Deku. Deku would then smile as his mask thing, like his little mask area, would all be gone. And Deku would have the mask area down as MJ would be watching the situation. She'd be smiling, thinking that he did it. She's proud of him. As Deku would then tell All Might he can just sit down if he wants, as All Might would say no. He would put his fist back up, and this is when a bunch of people would begin to surround them. A bunch of people around the area would then start coming all over the place, and they would begin to cheer for All Might and Deku all around the world. You could hear people screaming Deku's name, people screaming for All Might, and people just saying that Deku's going to be an amazing hero. A lot of people are having great thoughts about Deku, and it's at this point that they're honestly just having a good time. For about 7 minutes or so, everything was good, and Deku and All Might are just kind of standing there. All Might had to exhaust less energy, but All Might is still, basically on his last legs. And All Might would have already turned into a Small Might form, revealing to the entire world and population that All Might can no longer be the symbol of peace. And after he does that, All Might would grab Deku's hand as he would lift his arm up and say that this is the next symbol of peace. Deku would look towards All Might as he would smile at his direction, and Deku would pass out immediately. And it's at this moment that a tiny little bomb would come in out of nowhere. It would beep, and Deku's spider senses would kick in at the last moment. As the bomb would almost blow up the helicopter, Deku would have shot a web at it and deflected it right back at the Goblin, who would have came in flying on his little propeller thing. Little jet thing that he uses. I don't know what it's called. It's the Goblin, the Goblin rider or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, Deku would have ended up stopping it. And this is when Deku would look at him as immediately his eyes would get filled with rage, and he would not be able to control himself. They would begin the fight. Deku would lunge at the Goblin as he would throw blow after blow, with the Goblin simply laughing and catching one of his hands. He would then begin to crush Deku's fist, to which Deku would then kick him right in the leg, breaking it, bending his knee inwards. The Goblin would shriek out in pain as Deku would then be let go by his hand. He would then start to surround him with a bunch of black webbing, to which the Goblin would then start getting restrained, but he would rip it off. And Deku would then say, "Here's Johnny." Just kidding, he wouldn't say that, but seriously though, he would shoot a bunch of acid webbing at the Goblin, which would actually end up destroying part of the suit. He would have ended up blowing off the mask, which would end up revealing that the person behind the Goblin mask is Osborne himself. Deku at this point would see that he's no longer afraid of him. The Goblin isn't some abnormal being, it's a person. Just like him. It's Osborne. Immediately, he would be filled with so much confusion, and the goblin would stand up as he would look towards Deku's direction and say, "Bet you didn't expect this, kid." He would then begin to laugh in a creepy way. As Deku would look at him, he would fall back, and he would then wonder why. The goblin would look at him and he would say, "Because of you." He would then say that it was you, wasn't it? That day when the spider went missing, that was you. Deku would look at him as he would act as if he doesn't know what he's talking about, but the goblin would then say that it's your fault. It's your fault that everything turned out this way. As Deku would look at him, he would then say he doesn't know what he's talking about, and the goblin would then look at him and start laughing evilly as he would then say that he knows it was him. He saw it on the cameras, and it all barely started to get pieced together. Before, he thought that it was just his own mistake, but he finally put the pieces together. Those abilities that he has, that's not a quirk. It's not a quirk at all. It was my invention, my creation which gave you those powers. And now, it's me who's gonna take it away. He would look towards Deku as he would immediately punch Deku, sending him flying into a building, to which Deku would create webbing right behind him to catch himself and kind of tank the blow. Afterwards, Deku would get propelled right back at the goblin, to which the goblin would greet him with another punch straight to the jaw. He would uppercut it, sending him into the sky. The goblin would then send his jet thing up at Deku as it would go over there, and some spikes would come in out of nowhere as Deku would immediately realize what's going on. He would catch it before it can stab into him, and he would flip it in the air as Deku would then get on top of it, and the goblin would smile as he would say, "That's perfect." He would start basically making the thing go crazy and haywire, as this is when Deku would realize that if he fights the goblin with anger and fear in his heart, he'll never be able to beat him. This is when Deku would basically grab his webbing as he would fling the thing all the way to the ground. It would get destroyed, but this is when the goblin would press a button on his armor, which would have another one literally fly in about 20 seconds later. And he would then get on top of it as Deku and he would begin to fight all around the city. That area which they were at, they're not there anymore. Now they're fighting from rooftop to rooftop, just going at it back and forward. As Deku would land hits, the goblin would as well. And they would both just be going at it like completely like animals. There was no clear-cut winner. Deku's fear, it was gone. He realized that it was just a man. And he always has known, but the feeling of not knowing who's under that mask just brings a little bit of just unease into the room, I guess you could say. But after realizing that it was somebody just like him who can bleed, Deku's fear, it would have been gone. Now, he just needs to stop feeling as if he's weaker than him. And now, this is when it'll finally click in. Deku's senses would go haywire, and this is when he would finally unlock his perception of future sight even further than what he had before. It's at this point that Deku can now see a full 30 seconds into the future, and this is when he would see that the goblin is about to pierce him from behind with another one of those devices. As it would come in to almost pierce him, but right at the last second, Deku would jump over it as it would penetrate straight inside of the goblin. And at that moment, immediately, Deku would blitz the goblin, as he would have ended up going so fast, the goblin just couldn't react to the speed. Deku would have coated himself in a layer of electricity, as well as a layer of a venom symbiote around himself. And Deku would literally just go over to the goblin and push the little, oh my god, I really need to know what that thing's called. The glider. Yeah, it's a glider. I'm so dumb. The fact that I haven't looked that up this whole time, like, I honestly just could have done that before. But he would shove the glider deeper into Osborne as he would let out 100 million volts onto him. And that is when the goblin would just be atomized. There would be no more cells left to regenerate. He was done. Deku at this point would pass out, and this is when a helicopter would come from above. It would beam its light onto Deku, and they would pick him up and take him out to the hospital. And this is when people would start basically just looking at Deku, and all people from all around the world would start viewing Deku as a hero. The kid was nothing but a student, but already he risked his entire life to save them. He didn't have to do that. He wasn't even sure if he could win. The last time that happened, it was almost done for. But he did it. People would begin to cheer all around the world, and they would go haywire, dude. They'd be hype. But, all that aside, Deku would basically wake up the very next day, and on his bedside, he would see his mother Inko and MJ. His classmates even Bakugo was standing there. And they're all smiling there, except for Bakugo. He kind of has his arms crossed and he's just like, I didn't want to be here, nerd. He would say, maybe if you were stronger, you would have never had to do all those things. As Deku would laugh and say, yeah, Bakugo, whatever. This is when Bakugo would kind of just be like, huh. And this is when MJ would hug Deku tightly, as Inko would do that as well. And Deku would say, my ribs, as they would both be like, oh yeah, sorry about that. Inko would then slap Deku across the face, and she would say, if you ever do that again, she'll kill him. As Deku would say, yeah, sorry about that, Mom. And Inko would then start smiling as she would begin to hug Deku even tighter. This is when Deku would slowly start getting up and he would just start realizing that MJ is standing. He would say, how are you? Wait, what happened? As she would basically look towards his direction and say that she was healed by Recovery Girl. Recovery Girl, after she woke up the very next day, that same morning, she ended up using her quirk on her to speed up the healing process. And her with the ability of being able to shapeshift, she kind of helped out with a lot of the healing which came with all the other stuff. And after Deku hears that, he would smile. As it's at this point that Deku starts taking off the little hospital gown, and All Might would walk inside the room. As he would walk inside and say, I am here. As he would look towards Deku's direction and say, guys, can you guys please step outside for a moment? As everybody would look at All Might, they would understand what he means. And he would then look towards Deku, as Deku would say, hey, All Might. All Might would look at him as he would transform into his buff state and then cough out blood. He would then be like, yeah, probably won't be able to do that again. As Deku would laugh at All Might's expense, All Might would then start laughing as well. And he would then look towards Deku as he would say that he needs to tell him something. Although what he did back there in the USJ wasn't right, he has more than made up for it by stopping the Goblin and helping him take out one of the world's greatest villains, All for One. He talked to the Japan Council and they believe that it's right for Deku to be allowed to come back into UA, just as long as he never does anything like that ever again. Deku would look at All Might as he would then say, wait, you did that for me? As All Might would look at Deku, he would then say, I sure did, kid. Deku would hug All Might as he would then tell him that he was his hero for a reason. All Might would then laugh and he would then basically be told that he better not be late to school tomorrow. As Deku would say, wait, we gotta go for school? Already? All Might would say, yeah. I mean, you're fighting against time constantly. Don't you remember Aizawa telling you that? All Might would then start chuckling and Deku would then say, yeah. As All Might would basically just smile, he would then say, alright, don't be late. We have the provisional license exams tomorrow. Deku would smile, and this is when All Might would leave, letting MJ and Inko come back into the room. Deku and MJ would kind of just be talking for the next couple of hours. Deku would then heal, and they would then go over to MJ's house as they would basically have a movie night. And the very next day would be the provisional hero license exam. Now, in this version of events, everything is kind of I guess you could say. Let's see, how long has this recording been? It's been 14 minutes long. I guess I can cover the provisional license. Anyways, all right, let's see. So basically they all go on the bus as the provisional license happened, and this time when the kid that looks like Deku walks in, everybody looks at him and they all immediately are just like, yeah, this kid's definitely faking it. Deku would have been the first one to notice, just due to the fact that he could see 30 seconds into the future and saw when Bakugo called him out on his stuff. Now he would walk up and he would basically look towards MJ's direction as he would grab her hand and go in and kiss it. But Deku would immediately just grab him by the face, literally palm his face. And he would then push him back into his classmates as they would all run away basically. After this is when Shiketsu High kids would pull up and they would all basically just start greeting each other. Inasa would obviously bang his head on the ground just in some normal Inasa fashion. He'd basically look at all the students and he'd just be like, hello, UA kids. He would look at all of them and he'd be pretty chill just because Inasa's a pretty nice guy. But this is when he would look at Shoto and he would get angry. Also, by the way, one thing that I did forget to mention is that Todoroki in this version has never gotten over his ability to use the fire. He's never had that thing, so he still only uses his ice. Also, one thing to add, Bakugo ended up winning the sports festival, so they're all looking at Bakugo's direction as kind of the strongest one, but others are looking at Deku just due to the fact that he fought alongside All Might and even took down the Goblin. That fight was broadcasted and it has 1 million hits, dude. Everybody's watching that fight. That thing's popping, dude. Like, imagine watching a Spider-Man Deku versus Goblin, dude. That thing would be awesome. Like, If this fight was animated, that thing would be so clean. But anyways, that being said though, they would all go inside. They would be explained their little task with the balls and stuff like that, or they have to hit their targets, and they all have, 3 lives that they have to get out 6 people. They would all go outside and they would basically start doing that, as people would of course do the targeting of class 1A, and they would basically not even be affected. Deku would literally create a dome around them with metal webbing, and as soon as all the balls hit, Deku would immediately pull it all back, as Deku would then start shooting acid webbing at all of the people's direction, causing them to all think that they were going to get burned. But in reality, Deku literally put the acidity level all the way down, so it literally felt as if it was just water. And as that happened, Deku would have literally blitzed over there and just started touching each and every single one of their little life things. He touched each one of them 3 times, so he ended up racking up about, let's see, 300 points. 300 points in less than a second. That's how OP this Deku is. And you got a problem with it, then my apologies. But anyways, that being said, Deku would do that, and this is when the rest of the license exam would happen. Todoroki and Inasa would end up failing due to the fact that they don't like each other, and the rest of the exam would basically go as it did in canon. Everybody would kind of get good scores. Deku would actually be able to take out Gang Orca swiftly too. It's not even like a hard victory. Deku literally claps Gang Orca as if it was nothing. And now we move on to when they all go back to class and they are all greeted by the big 3 of UA. Immediately when they walk inside, Mirio would walk up to Deku as we would say, hey. Deku would look at Mirio and he'd say, what's up? As Mirio would look at Deku, he would basically proceed to explain to him that, he saw him on the news. He saw that All Might lifted his hand and told him he was great as well. And All Might said that that's awesome. He can't wait to work with him someday. Deku would look at Mirio as he would say, yeah. It's same, as Deku was just in a good mood. He could tell that Mirio was a genuine person. He had a pretty good liking to Mirio. And this one, all of them would try to explain that they basically need more experience. But Mirio, of course, being Mirio, would end up basically challenging them all to a fight, and this basically leads to all of class 1A fighting against Mirio. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, all of them literally get clapped except for Bakugo, who was actually able to dodge the first hit. But when Mirio did the poking eye thing, Bakugo was done for. Like, that was GG. And when it comes to Deku, when Mirio tried to hit Deku, Deku literally could see right past time. He knows about his permeation just due to that fact. And when Mirio tries to come up and punch Deku and say power, Deku would actually be able to avoid it. Now, Deku would literally just sidestep the blow and punch Mirio in the gut 1 time, causing Mirio to get flung straight out of the wall. Mirio would get knocked out immediately, and this is when Deku would basically just think that that's pretty much it. The rest of the big 3 would explain to everybody that all they're basically lacking is experience, except for that one up there. As, what's her name? Nejire would say that to Deku. Deku would say, yeah, he appreciates it. And MJ at this point, she basically would have also gotten clapped by Mirio. Deku would go up to her and ask her if she's okay, and she would say that she is. As it's at this point that Deku and MJ are basically walking home, but as they do, from the floor, Deku could see a face pop up. As Deku would say, Mirio, is that you? Mirio would pop up and say, hey, I was wondering if you wanted to come with Sir Night-Eye for your agency. As Deku would say, wait, that's the hero who can see, wait, he's the one who has foresight, right? Mirio would say, yeah. Deku would say, I'd love to work with him. Mirio would basically look at Deku and say, well, we have a deal then. As Deku would say, sure, we sure do. Mirio would then look towards Deku as he would say, all right, then I'll see you at the train station tomorrow. Deku would say, you definitely will. And Deku would then go off with MJ as he would do a little bit of late night studying. You feel that vibe? Afterwards, he'd basically go over to meet up with Mirio the very next day, and this is when he would arrive at Sir Night-Eye's agency, to which, events basically go as if you would expect them to. Events all kind of go as you would expect them all to go in the original story. Deku would arrive with Mirio. They would see Bubble Girl and Sir Night-Eye over there looking all glum and all this stuff. And Mirio would tell Deku all he has to do is make him laugh. When they arrive, Deku isn't actually able to make Sir Night-Eye laugh. However, when he presents him with the little challenge of getting the stamp, Deku can see what Sir Nida is going to do. So immediately upon the first try, Deku just speed blitzes Sir Nida, like leaving Sir Nida 0 ways to block Deku. And after that, he would basically begin to tell Deku that they're going to do a little bit of training for about 30 minutes. To which he would begin to ask Deku how many seconds he can see into the future. Deku would explain that he can only see about 30 seconds into the future currently. He doesn't know if that's his maximum or if it'll ever get bigger than that, just due to the fact that he's never tried. However, okay, that was weird. I was trying to like purposefully voice crack, but like I don't know, I just couldn't do it. But anyways, Deku would then basically proceed to just train a little bit with Sir Nida, and this is when Sir Nida would basically look towards Deku, as he would look at Mirio and tell him that they're gonna go out and do a little bit of patrol. This leads to Mirio and Deku walking outside. However, in this version, when they actually end up running into Eri, Deku does not at all like be afraid of what's called Overhaul. Deku immediately jumps into action as he would turn invisible with Overhaul getting on guard, but Deku within that split second would have jumped from wall to wall and kicked Overhaul in the back of the head so hard that Overhaul literally just dropped. Like he dropped like a bag of potatoes, and Deku then proceeded to go over to Overhaul, cuff him with handcuffs, and take him to the police station, where they basically confiscated his quirk destroying bullets, and they would end up finding out more about his operation. This leads to the what's it called, the little takedown of the villains. I forgot what it was called, the Overhaul Raid arc. Yeah, the Overhaul Raid. And they would end up saving Eri without any problems at all. Eri would never have to go through any of the events with Mirio losing his quirk. And since Mirio was even stronger due to the fact that he has One For All, he would have actually been able to take down Overhaul if he wanted himself. But Deku just acted faster than Mirio could. That being said, this basically leads to Deku being a sort of big brother figure to Eri. And Inko actually ends up adopting Eri. That's a little good thing that comes from this story. Deku would take her to the UA Sports Festival, and he would be like a little bit of a big brother to her, with MJ liking Eri as well. And this is when the gentle criminal stuff would happen. Deku would end up whooping that man, and this basically leads us to the very last thing to cover, the joint training arc. In this version, when the joint training arc starts, the team is basically going to be as it was in the original timeline. I believe that Deku was going up against Shinso, Monoma, and who else was he going up against? Like I kind of remember some, but like I don't remember all of them. Let's see. Deku was with Ochako, Mina, and Mineta versus Shinso, the girl with the weird mask, the short kid, the girl with the red outfit, and Monoma. Yeah, I don't know all of their names. They're 1B students. I mean, who cares about 1B students? But yeah, in this version, Deku would literally just tell Uraraka to make all of them weightless, to which she would. And Deku would carry them all with a substance that kind of looks like Black Whip. Immediately, Deku would shoot the black venom substance all over the arena, and he would capture Shinso and Monoma, each and every single one of them, throwing them each into the cage, and they basically end up GGing everybody. This is when Deku, at the end of everything, just gets praised by everybody just like usual, and we basically end off our story with Deku smiling. Deku would look up at the sky, look at MJ, and just think that his life's great, and that it is. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about this story down below in the comments. In case any of you guys are wondering what happens to Shigaraki or the Liberation Army, they basically end up getting taken out later on in the story when Deku becomes a pro hero and the Liberation Army finally begins to act up. This, however, is basically where we are going to be ending the story for What If Deku Was Spider-Man. I hope you guys did enjoy the story, just due to the fact that the story is pretty lit. You know, it's a pretty dope story. What If Deku Was Spider-Man had one of the dopest stories that I think I've ever made. Like, I thought it was pretty dope. You know, it started off with Deku being a little bit of a nerd. He grew some confidence. You know, he and Baku had a little bit of a rivalry. Deku got with MJ. And, you know, he just became a great hero. Then he went astray. He had a little bit of a vigilante arc. He came back and came back better than ever. And honestly, I just like the way that I made this story overall. Let me know what you guys thought down below in the comments. Blue Keith, man, I appreciate you for the commission. And in case you want any more, you know where to find me. That being said, though, guys, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.